WGBH News coming to you from the Boston Public Library at WGBH Studio for another Lunch Hour Live. And today, as we often do with our transportation programs, the first Wednesday of every month, we'll be discussing Massport's latest rideshare rule changes at Logan Airport and Uber and Lyft in general. And we encourage you to send us your comments and questions, both on Facebook and Twitter, and here at our studios at the Boston Public Library. My guests today are Catherine Carlson, Director of Transportation for A Better City. Thank you, Catherine, for being here. And Chris Dempsey, Director of Transportation for Massachusetts. Thank you both.
Hey, Bob.
Well, as we know, Massport has been phasing in changes regarding its Uber and Lyft procedures at Logan Airport. And as of today, we have all rideshare pickups happening at terminals A, B, C, and E, originating from the parking garage instead of curbside as usual. And beginning next Monday, all ride app drop-offs between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. will move to the lower terminal roadways, and then December 9th, ride app drop-offs between 10 a.m. and 4 a.m. move to the central parking garage as well. So this is quite a change for Massport and Logan. It's not unique to Logan Airport. A lot of airports across the country are responding to the increase in volume of Uber and Lyft traffic. Now, we do know at Logan Airport, Uber and Lyft made 12 million vehicle trips to and from Logan in 2018, and 5 million of those did not have passengers. They're known as deadheading trips. And Ubers and Lyfts make up about 40% of traffic at Logan during peak periods. So I guess my first question for both of you is, how do you react to this plan, and do you think it will work? Catherine?
Great, thank you. As everyone here realizes, and as the governor's report showed this summer, congestion for the region overall is at a crisis. And so it's not just at Logan, it's throughout the region. And so we're impressed that Logan is taking these steps to try to manage better the issues they've been having curbside. And I actually think that number has gone up to 15 million this year in 2019 right. So far. So it keeps increasing, and they just did not have the curb space to give the customer an experience that was pleasant getting in and out of the airport. This is a really solid phasing approach to better managing that for the customer.
And Chris, what's your take on this new plan?
I think I would agree with Catherine. I mean, thinking about the scope of this problem here, 80 million TNC trips every single year in Massachusetts, 40 million of them just in the city of Boston. And so you think about Logan as a big attractor of trips or generator of trips. The number of TNC trips at Logan every day is equivalent to if every single person that goes to a typical Red Sox game got in an individual TNC and went to Logan Airport. It's that scale of a problem. And what that's doing is that it's eroding the experience for everybody. One of the interesting things about TNCs is that while I may love to take a TNC to the airport, the decision that is best for me, which is to get into an individual car, sit in the back seat, and have the driver deal with the rest of it, is the worst decision for everybody else that's also trying to get to the airport at the same time. And there's just not enough room for all of us to do that all at once. So what Logan is trying to do, what Massport is trying to do, is to try to better manage that experience and hopefully improve it for everybody, whether they're arriving by TNC, whether they're arriving by an individual vehicle, or whether they're arriving by the Blue Line or the Silver Line or the other transit and private bus services that provide options to Logan.
And which you mentioned TNC, for those who do not know, stands for Transportation Network Company, which includes ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft. Can you blame Uber and Lyft for the congestion?
I don't think so. You know, we don't want to make Uber and Lyft the scapegoats of our congestion problem. If they did not exist, we would still have a very congested region, and we should still be thinking about tools and methods to address that problem. So they're not the only reason that we have congestion, but they are a part of the problem, and there's more that they can be doing. We can probably talk later this afternoon about some other tools to impact issues outside of Logan. But in terms of being at Logan, Massport is taking, I think, a smart approach here. As Catherine said, it's a phased approach. They're not trying to do everything at once. Other airports around the country that have done this have tended to sort of rush into it, and they've had some more negative outcomes here. But Massport is being thoughtful about it. Let's talk about some of the examples. If you're a rider that's wanting to leave the airport now in a TNC, 3 weeks ago before this was in place, that meant you walking actually a further distance than you have to walk now and walking outside in the elements. And as we get closer to winter, it's not going to be fun to have been sitting out there, maybe in the snow or in the rain, waiting for your Uber or Lyft. Now you walk through a covered bridge, essentially, to central parking. You're going to have heated areas at central parking to wait. And you actually should get a car faster because you've centralized all the rides into that one place. So rather than degrade the experience, we think they're actually upgrading the TNC experience, but making it more efficient at the same time.
Well, Catherine, let me ask you. I mean, is this all because of an increase in business at Logan Airport? Is this why we have so many additional people and vehicles there?
Well, it's absolutely partially because of an increase in travel, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I know that Logan is growing year after year, especially the number of international passengers. But the reality is we're not just seeing this phenomenon happen with TNCs at Logan. Again, it's happening throughout the region. And we're incredibly lucky with Logan being situated where it is. When you look at where some of the other cities that have implemented better management on the Ubers and Lyfts, they don't have transit access to their airports already. They're far out of the city. We have a well-located airport with multiple transit options, and so it probably will work at Logan better than it works a lot of places, and hopefully can be an example for thinking about this throughout the region.
Our associate producer here, Emily Shariel, went to Logan on the first day of Massport's plan to see how rideshare passengers were adjusting to the changes. Let's take a look at her report.
So I'm currently in baggage claim in Terminal A, and on a normal day, if I was getting off a flight, I would hop outside, call an Uber, and be on my way. However, with these new changes, I now need to make the walk to the central parking garage. So we're going to time it and see how long it takes. So one thing I will say about the walk between baggage claim and the new rideshare pickup area is that it is incredibly well marked. I mean, every 50 or so feet, you're seeing a big purple sign that says, "Rideshare pickup area this way." So no matter where you're coming from, you will definitely figure out where you're supposed to go.
I think it's a good idea to move them to a central location because I fly all over the country and I never know if I can go to the curb or what. And the signage is great. Yeah. And I think it just relieves some of the congestion at the curb for those people that have a friend that is picking them up.
I don't really notice that much of a difference. Maybe it's not as congested up top as it is down here, so give you a little bit better opportunity to see your car when it arrives. So.
Yeah, you know what? It's a lot easier than having to wait in line out here, so most of the time it's not an issue.
Depending on where I am located, it could affect me, but as far as having a central location, I don't see it being a big deal.
So a few elevator and escalator rides later, I officially made it to the new rideshare pickup area in the central parking garage. Now the walk here was incredibly easy. It was only about 3 minutes long, it was very well marked, and seems like only a small detour from what passengers are used to doing. However, it is still only the first day of this plan, so we still have a ways to go to see if it really sticks.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. And I was there too the first morning, and I can tell you that there was a lot of confusion among some of the drivers. And I think Uber and Lyft will say, well, we've emailed all of our drivers to tell them about these changes. That's assuming that all the drivers read their emails. And I definitely got the impression that some of them didn't know they were in Terminal A or Terminal C. A lot of the passengers were trying, where's my Uber, where's my Lyft? They were waiting. And there was a lot of Massport and Mass DOT support traffic policing of the traffic. And from what I've seen, at least the reaction is that a lot of that has been kind of worked out and they're getting used to it. But that first day was a little confusing. I found that none of the passengers objected to the walk at all. I think people are used to walking when they get into airport terminals. And so that wasn't the issue. It was just, where's my ride? Does my driver know where I really am? So unfortunately, we had invited representatives from Uber and Lyft to be here this morning, or this afternoon, to talk with us, but they declined. But from what I've at least been able to gather on following Twitter and so forth is that there hasn't been the same kind of problem that there's been at LAX and some other airports. Is that your impression as well?
That is my impression. I think what Massport has done here is taken this phased approach. So I think they did maybe terminals C and E were the first two
A and C.
or A and C,
Yeah,
sorry,
right,
to
yeah.
convert, and then the remaining two converted a week later. And that gave people the opportunity to sort of adjust, drivers and passengers both, to adjust to that process. And then there are more phases to come, as you mentioned when you kicked off the show, in terms of drop-offs and eventually centralizing it all in one location. So you do want to take an incremental approach. That's true at the airport, and it's true a lot in government and in transportation broadly. People are used to certain things, and as you move them to a new idea or a new concept or a way of doing things, you have to really kind of take that slowly and hold their hand. So seeing the signage is great, and hearing that people reacted to that well is even better.
How about you?
Yeah,
What's the feedback?
I think the reactions that we're seeing from day one. I mean, usually you expect some growing pains, and the fact that all of the passengers seemed to be happy with the changes, I think, speaks to the thoughtfulness with which Massport approached this. And the nice thing is, once it's all centralized, when you actually look at this, this is not without goals in mind, right? All of these programs were put in place to achieve both trip reduction and removing or decreasing of the deadheading, which is what we all hope to do around the city, right? I mean, removing empty vehicles, driving around. And so to put everything in a central location, once you have the pickups and drop-offs, is going to be great for rematching customers, and will really put them on the way to reducing all of those deadhead trips. I think I'm looking forward to using it next time I fly.
The rematching is an interesting subject because I don't think a lot of people understand how that's going to work. But as drivers come in and drop off people, are they required to go to the parking garage to pick up people, or can they still proceed to try to get out of the airport?
My understanding is there's no requirement for the drivers
Yeah,
to do
so-
that. But what this will do is make it easier and more attractive for the driver to have that as an option. And that's the best outcome, because what you don't want is to drivers to do those deadhead trips where they only do one direction and then they drive out. You've created essentially two trips when you only dropped off one passenger, and you want to avoid that as much as possible.
And it would seem to be an incentive for them to have a passenger instead of sitting in that traffic trying to get out of the airport empty, right?
Correct.
So you hope that. The fees, $325 drop-off, $325 pickup. The companies aren't paying those fees. The customers are paying them, right? I mean, they might say that, this is a fee to the company, but you talk to the drivers and, well, this is going to increase the cost.
This is something we talk about a lot in the work we do in terms of achieving the goals of both congestion and climate change in the region, right? The governor's Future of Transportation Commission report, which came out last year, stated very clearly that we need to move people, not vehicles, and that we need to move more people in fewer vehicles. There is actually no way that we can do that without having some pricing incentive to help make that change.
It's $1.50
And
for
so
sharing,
we would
right?
say, exactly. So how Massport has set it up is there is $1.50, it's $3.25 if you're a single occupant of the vehicle, and $1.50 if it's shared. So that's an incentive to move to some of that behavior change. And then again, they're also vastly increasing service on the Logan Express, creating multiple new benefits for people who take Logan Express, the water taxis or the water transportation and transit. And so that, again, all of that packaged together is part of that that push to move people towards getting to and from the airport more sustainably if possible.
Now, we do have one question from the audience. We want to encourage people here at the Boston Public Library to submit your questions, and also on Facebook and Twitter. If you're watching us right now and have questions or comments, please be sure to send those in. The audience member says, do you know why this isn't working well in Los Angeles? And we've heard not only Los Angeles, San Francisco had problems. What were the problems out there that we haven't encountered at Logan?
So what I know about Los Angeles is that they essentially tried to do this all at once overnight, both drop-offs and pickups and all of their terminals all at once. So they didn't have as much time to plan, number one. Massport has said actually that they've been planning this since all the way back in 2018. So they've had a good 8, 9, 10 months to sort of get this right, and then they took that phased approach. And I think that has really paid dividends for them. It's been a smart management approach. Just, Bob, on the question about the fees, I think it's important to be clear that the fees are not in place yet. They will be in place once the more complete system comes online in December. But I want to go back to something that Catherine said earlier that was really important about what a regional amenity and benefit Logan Airport is for those of us that use it or benefit from it every day. It is one of the 15 busiest airports in the entire country, and it is on one of the smallest footprints and closer to downtown than essentially any other large airport in the entire country. And so we may grumble, and I'll be one of these people that might grumble about a $3.25 fee, but the savings having to only have to go, less than a couple miles from Logan to downtown Boston versus going to an airport like Denver International that's 25 miles out on the prairie outside of Denver, you're going to save much more for your $3.25 fee than the extra 20 or 25 miles that you're paying for your Uber or Lyft to get to Denver Airport. So we have to be willing to accept some of those trade-offs. And we think Massport has a responsibility, because of how close it is to downtown, because of how small that footprint is, to be as efficient as possible. And that's the step they're trying to take here.
Well, and if I can just
Sure.
follow up on that as well, Massport has made it very clear that these fees are going to exactly what Chris mentioned, that these fees are meant to improve mass transit opportunities, high occupancy vehicle opportunities for them, and to actually give the customers benefits from those fees. So it's not one-sided at all when you look at how that's going to play out.
We talked before about the reduced fee, the $1.50 for sharing a ride share with someone else. But I hear a lot of complaints that when people do that, they can't get to where they're going in a timely fashion, that they don't know where they're going to end up. So when it comes to carpooling rideshare passengers, it's a special challenge, isn't it? I mean, how do you see resolving that?
Go ahead.
Considering I'm not the one building the algorithms, I'm guessing every day, they're trying to match people in our conversations with Massport, doing the best to match people going on similar routes. So I have a feeling that will work itself out over time, and it's not going to be a solution for everyone, absolutely.
Yeah.
But as much as it can be, and as much as we can incentivize that, we applaud the fact that they're trying.
Bob, I think something else is important there is what's called the network effect, which is that when you have a small number of people that are trying to share rides, the likelihood that anyone is going to the same place is going to be relatively small. But as we create these incentives where more and more people are opting for the shared rides, you have that network benefit, and it turns out, well, more people are trying to go to Brookline Village, more people are trying to go to Ashmont, more people are trying to go to Kendall Square. And so your likelihood of a match is better, and that means the quality of your ride experience will be better because you're not going from Logan to Back Bay, back to Kendall Square. You've got two people that want to go straight to Kendall Square, and they got a better trip.
It'll be interesting to see how they actually make that happen, because to me it's a big
There's
challenge.
work to be done, that's for sure.
And again, it's a big challenge, but when you think about it, in congestion management overall, we're not trying to get every single person who's now taking a single TNC ride into a shared one. But if you remove 5% of them, you can see a drastic change. One of the rules of thumb that we look at in terms of congestion overall is that if you can remove 5% of cars from the road, you can actually see a 20% reduction in congestion. So, the network effect combined with the fact that it's not a one-for-one that we need to achieve, I think will show some results.
We have an Uber driver in the audience here who says she is confused about whether Massport wants her to drop off and leave or stay and wait for another call. Is that because the whole system isn't up and running yet?
I think that may be part of it. And to be fair, I have not been an Uber or Lyft driver, so I haven't had that experience of having the app in front of you and the various messages that it's sending. What I do know is that Massport has been trying to work closely with Uber and Lyft and through them to the drivers to improve the information. You mentioned the email that they sent earlier. But what I've heard Massport say is actually that Uber and Lyft had programmers, computer programmers on site at Logan Airport updating the app in real time. Wow. Things like how to draw what they call the geofence, which is kind of the GPS coordinates around where the pickups and drop-offs should happen. So I think there's an attempt at least to actively manage that, which is not to say that this driver's frustration or confusion is not at all real. I'm sure that it is. But I do think there's an effort to try to improve that and make the information better, both for the riders and also for the drivers.
Now, we originally had Tyler George, who is Lyft's regional director of New England, booked for this show, but he pulled out at the last minute. We can't get Lyft's perspective on this issue today, but we do have a clip of a rideshare driver sharing his thoughts on the changes. So let's watch that now.
How do these changes impact you as an Uber driver?
Well, everybody used to do it with the right place to pick it up. Everybody, you know, was waiting. Waiting was easy for us. Now we're gonna have a little hassle to pick it up people, because we have to go around and then wait in the other corner of the airport, all the way to come to the east of the airport to get us to someone.
So does this mean less money for you?
Yes, it's gonna be a little bit more problems for us to maneuver around, you know, to get someone. To drop off is okay, but to pick it up is gonna be a little bit more hassle.
Pick it up is going to be a little more hustle, he says. This is the first day also when I think there's a lot of drivers getting used to this. But one of the things he does say is we have to go all the way on the other side. It seems to be disrupting what would be his normal pattern of travel. Do you see that as a serious problem, or?
My sense is some of that is because we're sort of in this interim phase
Yeah. So
where
just
the
2 out of
drop-offs
4.
and pickups are not in the same place.
Yeah.
But as they end up being centralized, you would think that it would be an easier experience for that driver because it's all in one place. I think the other thing that is interesting here is that because that is happening in central parking and you're not having that Uber and Lyft sit in the traffic around the terminals, they should actually be able to avoid a lot of the airport congestion that currently exists at and around the curbside by essentially avoiding it and staying in the central parking area. So that's hopefully another benefit too.
By going to the garage, they get off the main roadway, which is where a lot of the congestion is.
Some of the worst congestion is, exactly.
Now, will these changes truly eliminate deadheading, do you think, with those empty cars?
I mean, I doubt any of us can say that it can fully eliminate all deadheading.
Because one of the
But
drivers
5 million trips. I mean, if we
Yeah.
get to 80% of that would be massive, right? And so I don't think the goal needs to be 100%, but it needs to be a lot better than it is now.
Because the driver I took back from the airport to get his input was, this isn't going to change the number of cars. It's not going to reduce congestion. Is it possible that it won't reduce congestion?
Also, I guess the question to that is, why wouldn't a driver want to pick up 2 rides for one, right? I guess I'm confused as to how it isn't an incentive actually for the drivers to take a ride there and have a ride waiting right away. So I feel like, again, this is in an interim period. Things are going to shake out over the next month or two, and I feel like that might be an appropriate question to come back to as people settle in.
Yeah, Bob, I guess it remains to be seen, but I think the earlier reports are that the areas around the terminals are already working better. They're already seeing some reduction in congestion. And let's see where the data gets us in 6 months or 8 months. Catherine's point is so important, though. With 5 million deadhead trips, if you just reduce the number of deadhead trips by 20%, that should be a reasonable number. That's 1 million fewer trips to the airport every year. That would be a huge benefit for regional congestion.
You both mentioned the location of Logan Airport, which is right downtown. What about the mass transit options getting to and from the airport? Are they really adequate? I mean, the Silver Line, for instance, couldn't we have a better kind of way to get to the airport than the Silver Line?
Well, we also have the Blue Line. I mean, right? You asked about some of the problems at LAX. Transit lines that already go to our major international airport is a massive benefit. And certainly, Chris and I both, from our respective organizations, are constantly working on ways to make the system better for users and to get the MBTA and Mass DOT the resources they need to provide the system we all deserve in 2020. So that's not to say, sure, it would be great to have more cars here or another bus there, but the fact is, we already have this massive asset of 2 right-of-way lines going to the airport, and then also water options, right? So I think certainly we're all working to improve the MBTA to be a 21st century best-in-class system. But let's not negate the fact that it already provides a huge benefit for Logan and for the region as a whole.
But we still have millions of people using Uber and Lyft.
That's right. Yeah.
So what's
it's the most
problem?
popular way to get to the airport.
Right, and what's the problem? Logan Express isn't good enough? It isn't frequent enough? I know they're trying to make changes in that. Should it be free? Should there be something more radical done? Should there be a designated bus lane for the Logan Express? Those types of things.
Those are absolutely the things we should be talking about. Those kinds of rethinking of the way that we use and allocate our road space today. So Massport is starting that process. They're trying to increase their number of Logan Express trips. I think it's 2 million a year now, up to 4 million to double it. And they're being kind of creative and innovative in that. Things like when you ride the Logan Express from Back Bay, and in fact, I just saw one of the buses go by our window, that you actually get to skip some of the security line as you go through to your flight. Those little perks that aren't monetary, but they save you time in a time in your life getting to a flight where you really care a lot about time and you want to save as much time as possible. But you're right that the Logan Express can be a challenging service because it comes in from places like Framingham and Braintree, and then it gets stuck in the nation's worst traffic congestion on Interstate 90 and Interstate 93. And again, Catherine and I, we both work on this issue of how do we improve our regional congestion through things like dedicated bus lanes, through things like using equitable road pricing to get our roads working better for people that are in buses or in carpools or other vehicles that have high occupancy. And if we can do that, we make those services more attractive, we improve the road use for everybody.
Catherine, you would agree that there could be improvements to the ways of getting to and from Logan?
Oh, absolutely, but we know how to do it, and we know what can work. And in fact, with the Logan Express, they've already seen a massive growth in ridership since they've implemented some of the new programming that Chris has mentioned. And hopefully they'll continue to build on that with some of the revenue that they're gaining from this new program.
Once again, any questions or comments you may have here at the library or on Facebook and Twitter, please let us know what your feelings are and thoughts about the new Uber and Lyft rules at Logan Airport. I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to see them pedaling back on. This looks like they're committed to this. They're going to see it through, and they're going to be monitoring whether or not. I had hoped, actually, Massport would be here to comment on how it's gone so far, but I can only anecdotally say that it seems to be going a lot better, certainly, than it is on the West Coast. But what further things could be done, do you think, to improve the situation, especially for people of East Boston who have been so... And the reason I ask this is because when you project, you've talked about the growth already at Logan, which had its busiest year ever in 2018. We're seeing Delta open up new service. We're seeing an expansion of the international service. There's more growth to come. So this is something that's not going to go away. In fact, it's probably going to get worse.
Bob, it's so important that you mentioned East Boston because this is an airport that is in a neighborhood. And the reports that you hear from residents in East Boston are that they can't even leave their driveway in the morning because there is so much congestion on their street, they're not even able to pull out onto their street. And that is a function of airport congestion, a function of the tunnel congestion. And so East Boston is very much ground zero of our regional transportation and traffic congestion crisis. They've got some good political leadership in East Boston, people like Senator Joe Boncore and Rep. Modero, who are both very involved in transportation at the state level. In fact, Boncore is the chair of transportation, Modero is the vice chair on the House side. And they're thinking about innovative and new ideas to try to address this issue. One thing that you know that we talk about a lot at T4Mass, Bob, is this idea of equitable road pricing. So of the 10 most populous regions in the country, Greater Boston is the only one that does not use some sort of time of day pricing on its tolled roads. And most of the roads that take you to the airport have a toll on them, whether it's the Sumner and Callahan Tunnel or the Ted Williams Tunnel. Most of the traffic arrives that way. If we were beginning to test some time of day pricing there, we'd be providing additional incentives for people to take transit or to drive at different times if they have that flexibility, and that would free up space for the people that do need to get there when they're trying to get there for a flight and they don't have another alternative that works for them. We think it's really unfair, actually, to drivers that at the moment Greater Boston is not using this technology while every other large metropolitan area is.
There's also talk about raising fees on TNCs. Uber and Lyft is one of the sources of revenue for transportation. What about that? I mean, how high can you really raise these fees and start affecting people's behavior, or just being making it difficult for people to get around? Isn't that a problem as well, if these fees are too high?
Certainly, you have to think about the balance, but as this entire conversation has been around how we can move more people in fewer vehicles, both to Logan and around the region overall. And so when MEPC had a report last year, or 2017, Fair Choices, that looked at what modes of transportation Ubers and Lyfts were pulling people out of. And over 50% of people taking Uber and Lyfts were being pulled from transit, walking, and biking. And so you have to find that tipping point that incents and makes it more affordable and convenient to use transit and more sustainable transit for. I think the average Uber and Lyft trip is under 4 miles. And so there's a lot of ability for us to do this without, and especially when you look at time of day, to Chris's point, thinking about when Ubers and Lyfts are congesting the roads more than others, right? So we probably don't need to think about the same type of pricing for someone getting off of work at their restaurant job at 2 a.m, that the roads aren't congested then. But if someone's choosing to hop in an Uber to work instead of hopping on the red or orange line, then it needs to be more expensive to account for that decision.
And the fees right now are like 20 cents a ride in Boston. I mean, it's not a lot of money, right? So you could raise that conceivably, and that money could go toward mitigating some of the traffic congestion.
That's right.
Absolutely, it has to.
Speaking of rail vision, could there ever be commuter rail trains that go directly to Logan Airport?
Well, there's been talk of that over the years. I think at the moment the focus is more on how do you improve some of the existing service, things like Logan Express, kind of building off of that proven and known model. But many people have been to cities, a lot of them are in Europe or Asia, and even some in the US, where there is direct rail service to the airport, at least downtown, if not to the broader commuter network. Certainly something that Greater Boston can and should consider. But at the moment, let me put it this way. If that's going to happen, that's more of like a 20, 30, 40 year kind of project. Okay. We've got a lot we got to do in the next decade to improve the system we have today, make that system work better. And I think that's the focus that Catherine and I both have.
One last thing. One of the drivers I had one time said to me, I said, you guys are being blamed for a lot of the congestion in the city. And he goes, well, we don't hold a gun to people's heads. I mean, they choose to do this because the mass transit system is so unreliable.
Yep.
So were we to fix and improve the mass transit system, that would address the congestion.
So here's what I'd say on that, Bob, and that's definitely true. We need to be focused on that. The worst performing part of the MBTA is actually not the commuter rail. It's not the subway system. It's not the boats. It's the buses. Buses only arrive on time somewhere between 65 and 75% of the time. And so they're not arriving late because the T is messing up its operations. They're arriving late because they are stuck in the nation's worst traffic congestion. So we should see that as very much a dual problem. If we can adopt policies that address that traffic situation, then we've instantly made the bus a more appealing option. And maybe for people out there that are saying, well, I'm just not a bus person, I'm not going to ride the bus, that's okay. But if others are attracted to that option and it leaves more space on our roads for the people that do want to drive, then it's a win for everybody. So getting those buses, whether it's the Silver Line bus or other Logan Express buses or other buses that go to the airport or anywhere in the region, getting them moving faster is the single most effective and efficient way to improve transit for all of us.
I want to thank you both for being here today, and certainly we'll be watching what happens at Logan Airport over the next few months. It'll be very fascinating to see if this dynamic plays out and they're actually able to do something about the congestion with this new plan. But thank both of you. Catherine Carlson from A Better City, Director of Transportation, Chris Dempsey, Director of Transportation for Massachusetts. And you have been watching Lunch Hour Live here at WGBH Studios at BPL. And we're here every first Wednesday of the month talking transportation. So we ask you to join us again on December 4th for our next session. I want to thank Emily Chariot and Linda Pollack for helping us produce this program this morning. And please join us again next month. But thank you for being with us.